Not many medical practices can trace their roots back over 100 years, but Vistar Eye Center can. The doctors at Vistar stand on the shoulders of legends, and in this video, I will tell you their story. Stonewall Jackson Gill was born in approximately 1870 in Bedford County. He grew up in Bedford and went on to Vanderbilt Medical School and decided to come back and become a general practitioner. He used to see his patients traveling to their homes on horseback, and he kept his supplies for suturing and medications in a saddle on the side of his horse. He also kept there anything he needed to deliver babies and so forth. Dr. Gill had a son, Dr. Elburn Grady Gill, who was born in 1891. He grew up watching his father care for patients and decided he wanted to be a doctor also, and he also attended Vanderbilt Medical School. After going to Vanderbilt Medical School, he trained at the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary in New York City, and then he traveled to Europe and he studied in London, Berlin, and Vienna. And in those places, he made a lot of contacts in the international ophthalmic and otolaryngology community. Dr. Gill returned to practice in Roanoke in 1921, performed his surgeries at Roanoke Memorial Hospital, but then decided to build his own eye and ear hospital, the Gill Memorial Eye and Ear Hospital, which is currently standing today. Here is a picture of the Gill Memorial Eye and Ear Hospital in the late 1920s. The hospital was named after his father. Here is an example of a bill from the mid-1930s of a patient who was admitted to the Gill Memorial Eye and Ear Clinic with diphtheria. You can see in the bill, the total of the bill was $44.50, and the balance was $26. Mrs. Willard said that her father sold a cow to pay for the remaining $26 of the bill. She received the diphtheria toxin, which cured her. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Gill made a lot of contacts when he was in Europe, and he, at a young age, became president of Lions Club International. In his capacity as the president of Lions Club International, he invited Helen Keller to come to Roanoke. And here's a photo of Helen Keller being greeted at the train station by Dr. Gill's daughter, Betty Byrne Gill. Dr. Gill and his wife stayed in contact for several years with Helen Keller until her death. Dr. Gill is most noted for the international congresses he would hold here every spring. It was the first postgraduate training for ophthalmology and otolaryngology in the country. People came from all over the country and all over the world to attend these congresses. And one of the highlights of these congresses was the speakers that he would bring in. The speakers would be the highlight speaker at gatherings in the evenings where the physicians brought their spouses to hear the speaker speak. Dr. Gill brought in several Nobel Peace Prize winners. Notably, this is a photo of Dr. Alexander Fleming, the inventor of penicillin. Dr. Gill is standing on his left. Another Nobel Prize winner that Dr. Gill brought in is Dr. Selman Waxman. Dr. Waxman was the inventor of streptomycin. Streptomycin was the first cure for tuberculosis, and for that, Dr. Waxman won a Nobel Prize. These Nobel Prize winners were huge celebrities of the time for the impact that they had curing such diseases as tuberculosis. The next Nobel Prize winner he brought in was Commander Charles Best. Dr. Best is the co-inventor of insulin. One of the biggest celebrities that Dr. Gill brought in were the Mayo brothers, the founders of the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Dr. Gill, in the 1950s and 60s, brought in associates that practiced for the next generation. Notably, he brought in Dr. Harris, Dr. Crowgy, Dr. Shortridge, and Dr. Humphreys. Later on, Dr. Wood and Dr. Sowers joined the group. Dr. Harris was the catalyst behind building the 707 building. He made the first two floors centered on ophthalmology. The fifth floor was for ENT, and the middle two floors were bought by a lawyer group. Here are a few photos of Dr. Wood in the mid-1980s using the technology available at the time to do advanced cataract surgery. Kathy Cowan was the CEO of Vistar from the early 1990s to 2011. Kathy started with Vistar in 1968 as a file clerk and worked her way up to CEO when she retired in 2011. Dr. Sam Rucker was a general practitioner in Manita. Dr. Rucker saw patients in an office that was about 10 feet by 10 feet, and patients would line up outside in their cars to see Dr. Rucker. In the afternoons, he would drive his car around to houses where people were sick, and he would care for them, and he would deliver the babies and do every other healthcare need for that community. And he did that from about 1935 to 1970. Dr. Rucker never took a vacation in all those years. The only time he took off was the 4 years he served in the Army. One of the babies he delivered was Dr. Ken Tuck. From Dr. Tuck's earliest memories, he always wanted to be like Dr. Rucker. He traveled with Dr. Rucker in a car with him and saw patients, and he admired him. Here's a picture of Dr. Tuck in his grade school in Manita. And note in the first row, many of the children did not have shoes on at school. Dr. Tuck's older brother was drafted into the war in World War II and had left the farm short-handed, and his father needed Dr. Tuck to stay on the farm. Dr. Tuck wanted to be a doctor, and he knew he'd never be a doctor if he didn't go to school. But his father had to keep him on the farm to keep the family fed. A truant officer came to the house, and he worked out a deal that if Dr. Tuck could get up at 3 in the morning and perform all his chores and do the rest of the chores when he got home from school and got a full 8 hours of work in, he could continue to go to school, and he did. He went on to Maryville College, on to University of Virginia Medical School, and then he did his ophthalmology training at the Mayo Clinic. After serving 2 years in public service on an Indian reservation, Dr. Tuck came back to Roanoke, where he practiced from 1964 on, and he left a tremendous legacy. Dr. Tuck went on to become the president of the Virginia Society of Ophthalmology, the president of the Medical Society of Virginia, and he went on to the most prestigious post that there is in ophthalmology as the president of the American Academy of Ophthalmology. Not only that, Ken served as a mentor to so many young people in this group, including me. Ken always put others' interests first. He enjoyed the success of younger partners. He enjoyed the success of young doctors. One of Ken's favorite sayings is, "The world belongs to those who show up." We never knew for sure if he borrowed this from Woody Allen or not because the quotes are very close, but Ken used to always say this. And his legacy of showing up to medical meetings, showing up to political activities, standing up for our profession, that's Ken's legacy. Ken is still alive and doing well. He lives in California, and we miss him greatly. This takes the history of Vistar up into about the mid-1990s, and there'll be future versions coming.